And now your host, News Operations Manager, Raymond Toplin.
Thanks for joining us for Close Up. Macon's new police chief, John Vasquez, has had a few weeks to get settled into his position. And today we're going to talk to him about his plans for the department and some of his plans as far as law enforcement and crime fighting are concerned. And thanks for joining us today. First of all, I guess, what drew you to Macon? Why Macon, Georgia? Why come here from an FBI job in Raleigh, North Carolina to take over as Macon's police chief?
Well, I don't know if I can answer that question. It's just a matter of chance. I came to visit my son and found out that there was a vacancy here and an opportunity, and I pursued it, and it worked out. It became a reality for me.
Anything special that attracted you to the community, to the city?
Well, I had been here before, 20 years before. I left in 1978. I was here as an FBI agent working in and around Macon. I met quite a few people. I associated with the neighborhoods, and I liked the ambiance, and I was hoping that one day I would be able to return, maybe not as a law enforcement officer, but just return to live here. So this opportunity has been great.
How has Macon changed in the time that you were away from it?
Well, it really hasn't changed too much. It's grown. Some of the people are older. Some of the establishments are still here. However, there has been some change. I guess I shouldn't say that. There has been quite a bit of change. There's been some progress, but I think there's room for some more.
Any surprises or anything that's kind of different from what you expected it may be since you took your position as police chief?
Well, I've never been a police chief before. I've been in law enforcement over 30 years. I had tremendous challenges around the country. I was a police officer before, but being a police chief is a very demanding job. It requires some tremendous leadership, tremendous demands on your time, organization-wise, internally and externally. So I'm learning as I go along. I'm depending on my staff and the feedback from the community. I'm looking at the community needs. So it's kind of a mutual thing every day.
How does it differ from the FBI in the setting you were in there?
Tremendous, tremendous difference. My last position in the FBI was an agent in charge of a certain part of North Carolina, so I supervised all investigations, all the activity in the FBI in that area. Being a police chief, you're restricted within the jurisdictional limits of a city. You're dealing with city and state law. All of your responsibilities are within the city, and it kind of ventures out beyond law enforcement. You start getting into community issues and people issues, as opposed to the FBI, who conducts investigations.
When you were hired, you mentioned that you were eager to get out and talk to churches and civic groups, organizations, get to know the community.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about that.
I've done that. In fact, that takes quite a bit of my time. I visited, by this time I visited most of the neighborhood watch groups. I've been to many churches. Every Sunday I go to a different church. I speak to different civic organizations. I go to the schools. Anybody that will call upon me, I'm there, and I represent the department. I want to listen to what their concerns are so I can turn around and provide that service to the best of my ability.
We see, of course, an increase in crime nationwide, all over the place. Macon's no different.
No.
And the biggest increase is in the ranks of the youth, teen violence, youth violence, seeing a bigger increase in crime in those demographics than any other. What kind of ideas do you have to try to tackle that in the Macon, Georgia area and in the central Georgia area?
Well, we have to be reactive, as you well know, but we also have to be very proactive. And within the organization, within the police department, we need to look at the various crimes, the crime issues, the crime problems, not particularly how they affect young people, but everybody. We just have to sit down with our people that we have added the responsibility of juvenile investigations and look and see how we can prevent as well as how we can suppress. So it's kind of a dual role, and we're also depending on the various resources around the community to help us and to try and share resources and to give us some information and some feedback of some things that normally we don't deal with every day, to get the a feel of what's going on in the community and then address those problems.
When people are looking at a situation like crime, you do have the crime issue and the policing issue, but you do also have a educational issue, poverty issues thrown in there as well. How do you integrate all of that and try to bring all those areas together in order to tackle the problem?
Well, I think it's important to work with community leaders and those that represent the various organizations, volunteer and otherwise, and get in there, roll your sleeves and work with them and try to identify and relate to their problems, because it's an entire problem. I think we have to approach it from various directions. I think we need to work together. We need to understand where each one of us is coming from within the scope of our responsibilities and pool our resources and work together. We have to, sometimes as you look at the problem after it occurs, that's not good enough. We have to look at the symptoms, why these issues surface, what we're doing to prevent it, and I'm really into that as I speak to the various community leaders.
Of course, whenever you have new leadership, and especially someone coming in from the outside, you're going to have some changes taking place, and sometimes folks are reluctant to change. It does, no matter how you do it, you're going to have people that get upset with change. How big of a challenge has that been as you move in and start trying to make your stamp on the Macon Police Department?
Well, sometimes there's a resistance to change if you've been doing something a certain way and you've always done it that way. But when you begin to see the positive effects of change, the professionalism, the image, things getting better, enhancing what we do, finding better and different ways of doing things, people soon jump on board and they want to identify with a winner. And that's what I'm trying to promote, is that vision, that plan, the short and long-term goals, being on a cutting edge of law enforcement, trying different approaches and practices, meeting with my colleagues around the state, sharing with others. And when your department begins to see that movement and that vision, they begin to fall in line. They understand it, they become a part of it, and it's exciting to see things happen.
One of the changes that got a lot of attention was the non-smoking policy for officers. Talk a little bit about that. How
that's a minor change. That's an organizational, internal, administrative change. My views on that is I feel like wellness and physical fitness is a job-related issue. I think we have to be as healthy as we can. We have to be able to defend ourselves, to deal with violence out there as we know it on the streets. We have to take care of our own people. It needs to begin internally. And somewhere along the line, a manager, an administrator like myself, you have to take a stand and you have to change the policy and you have to go forward. I implemented that policy, no smoking, my second or third day on the job. My people have followed suit. They know what's important. They've accepted that. They're acclimating to the changes. Those who need assistance have stepped forward. They've handled it as professionals. And I've basically forgot about it. It's not an issue in the department.
So partly professionalism as well, along with the health?
Absolutely. In dealing with the public, the image that you present, every person in my department deals with the public. He becomes an ambassador, he or she. And as you present yourself, that's the image that you're presenting of your organization. And so when you approach somebody, when you're establishing dialogue, and when you're communicating with somebody, it's not the professional thing to do to stand there with a cigarette. And so we recognize that, and we've changed that. And my people have fallen in line, and that's the way it has to be.
We're talking to Macon Police Chief John Vasquez, and we'll have more as Close Up continues. Welcome back to Close Up. We were talking to Macon's new police chief, John Vasquez. And as we left, we were talking a little bit about professionalism. And whenever you talk about that, training comes up as a big issue. Absolutely. What sort of plans do you have as far as training is concerned for the Macon Police Department?
Training is now mandated. We are requiring a certain number of hours by the state. The Macon Police Department is going above and beyond that. I'd like to expose my personnel to training from all over the country, the FBI Academy in Washington, other places around the country that provide the best training possible. I'd like my people to go and bring something back and share it with the rest of the rank and file.
I guess Macon's in a pretty good position too when it comes to training. You mentioned, of course, Washington D.C., but right here in Central Georgia, you've got a fine training center up in Forsyth.
Absolutely.
Down in Glenn County near the coast is another facility, and the Macon Police Department has its own training facility here as well.
We're taking advantage of all of it. We're sending my people everywhere, and it's exciting. This opportunity prior to my coming here was not really taken seriously. We basically trained to a certain point, and then we didn't send our people, we didn't take advantage of this. And now sending people around the country to expose them to different types of things that are going on and bringing them back and applying them in the city of Macon, that's exciting. That's when we really see change.
Of course, a big part of training is the ability to keep people once you get them trained, and to get a veteran crew in that is able to, if you're constantly changing out people, you don't always have the same level of training that you have when you do have veterans in. And a big part of that is police pay, which has been a point of contention with the Macon Police Department the past year or so. How can you address that? Obviously, your hands are tied somewhat. It's a mayor and a city council issue, but what kind of plans do you have to try to keep people here? As we're talking beforehand, you don't want people coming in for a job, you want people coming in for a career.
Absolutely. The mayor is very supportive. The council is very supportive. We know that in the city we just have so much money to deal with. So we're looking at pay, we're looking at benefits, we're looking at the long-term effect of the Macon Police Department. At the present time, our attrition rate is a little bit higher than most police departments around the country. So what we have to do is attract the best people and keep them here. And you do that with pay and benefits, training, job satisfaction. All those things play a role, not just pay, because nobody comes into law enforcement as a profession to try and make a lot of money. We know that. We know that right up front. You come in because you're dedicated, you're committed, you want to serve, you want to give something back, and that's the candidate that we're looking for so that we can invest in him or her on the long term.
Of course, some folks look at combined law enforcement as a way to possibly get more efficiency out of the money that's there. What are your thoughts on the prospect of combined law enforcement in Macon and Bibb County?
I agree with that. I think that when a city or a county entity has different individuals doing the same function, it's time to revisit that function to see if we can get the biggest bang for the buck. In other words, are we duplicating our services? Are we spending the taxpayers' money from different areas to do the same thing? So we have a city and a county in the same place. I think it's important that we look at this issue, we study it to see how we can get the best possible services to the people for the least amount of money.
Is that an area where you feel you can take a leadership role or have input, or is it something that pretty much has to be left to the county commissioners and the city council folks and the mayor?
Probably left to the city and the county and the leaders in that regard. As a police chief, I have my opinions. I just shared my opinion, but whichever way they go, I would still give them my best.
Of course, a challenge that you didn't have in the FBI that you will have in the position you're in now is dealing with politics a lot more.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there are politics with the FBI, but it's quite different, I'm sure, on the city level with the mayor and with 15 city council members. What kind of challenges that presented for you so far?
Well, politically, it doesn't present a problem to me. I think incumbent in my position, I think it's incumbent that I get along with people, that I establish dialogue with them, that I show them the map of where the police department is going, that I'm open and honest in my programs, in my changes, that I share with them exactly what's happening, that if a complaint comes in, I handle it properly and timely, that I build that trust and that confidence with our public officials. Then at that point, politics doesn't become a problem to me. Anything otherwise, it would become a problem.
You mentioned a map for where the department's going. Where would you like to see the Macon Police Department go?
Well, we've come a long way in the last 8-9 weeks. We have plans of becoming the best police department in the state very, very quickly, and one of the finest in the nation. And the map is basically strategic planning, long-term planning, looking at different programs, enhancing the things that we do, assessing our functions, training our people, expecting the best, emphasizing accountability and responsibility and professionalism. All those things are important internally, and then we have to look at our external responsibilities in dealing with the public media relations, community-oriented policing, the mounted patrol, everything that we do where the city will assess us and look at us, and we're interested in that report card. We want to know how well we're doing in meeting the needs and demands of the city.
What kind of specific ideas do you have to bring about those improvements and changes? You've mentioned some with the training and some of the other issues.
Well, we're looking at, the team is divided now in 4 team areas. Within those team areas, we're also developing zones within those team areas so that the officers can respond quicker and we can monitor their time that they're spending responding and handling calls. We're setting overlapping shifts now where we have more people on the streets during the high crime peak areas. Certain times of the day, certain times of the week, certain days of the week, we know where the crime is occurring and what's occurring there. Well, now we're analyzing those areas and we're addressing our resources accordingly. We're looking at the mounted patrol, as I mentioned a few moments. How can we use that to best benefit us and attack the crime problems? And so we have plans in that regards. We have motorcycles, we have bicycles, we have cars. We're going to do a lot of different things and be very innovative in our approaches and keep that cost effectiveness in mind as we do it.
Of course, a big barometer for success too in fighting crime is your closure rate and your arrest rate. Macon's, when you look at the top 200 cities, Macon doesn't rank very high in that, and some of the more recent FBI stats that are presented. What kind of plans do you have to try to change that?
I am reorganizing my investigative division. We have to set thresholds on specific crimes. For instance, white-collar crimes and auto thefts. We know we can't investigate every case, so we have to prioritize those that are most significant and direct our resources to those areas where we can solve them. If we continue to take reports and working everything, we can't be everything to everybody. So therefore, your closure rate begins to drop because you're not managing what you're doing.
Of course, recently there was a theft ring arrest, and at that time that you mentioned, you wanted to have more efforts like that. I guess
Absolutely.
It's you do run into a lot of situations where a few people are committing a lot of the crimes. How do you pinpoint and target those individuals?
Well, by crime areas, by what's coming in, by what's being reported to us, by what our intelligence base tells us, that's sources of information by other law enforcement agencies. I think what's important here, what we're leaving out here, is the joint cooperative effort of working with other agencies, bringing other jurisdictions to work together on a common problem, because crime respects no boundaries. And so that one particular operation, that's exactly what we did. Now we're looking at other areas of our responsibility, for instance, the gang problems. We're going to do that jointly with other agencies. Some other initiatives that will be ongoing will be as a result of combining resources with other law enforcement agencies, local, state, and federal.
Well, we're talking to Macon's police chief, and we'll have more coming up in just a moment. Welcome back to Close Up. We're talking to Macon Police Chief John Vasquez, and you mentioned some community-oriented policing, and it's something that it's been mentioned for quite some time. The last few Macon police chiefs have talked about it. There have been different efforts, different programs. What would you like to see on that front?
Well, the department at this point, when I came in and up to this point, our community-oriented policing efforts are somewhat fragmented. We're doing a lot of good things, but they're not well coordinated. We're not bringing them together. We're not involving some members of the community that need to be involved, that need to give us input and tell us how we're doing, where we need to be going, and so forth and so on. I've directed a study group to look around the country to see what's going on, to see what works and what doesn't work, and to see what we can afford. And now we're going to go forward and hopefully by August bring all these functions together in a coordinated effort and monitor and see what we're doing that's specific to Macon, Georgia, what the problems are here, so we can address those problems and clean up some neighborhoods and take care of some business, which I think is very important to what the people are saying. And
of course, some efforts in the past have been aimed at targeting specific trouble areas. Often what happens is the trouble moves out of that area and on to another. What are your thoughts on that strategy?
The trouble becomes very mobile, and they move from one neighborhood to another. It has to be a concentrated effort, a concerted effort, very well coordinated to hit the city at one time. I have to have dedicated people in those positions. I have to rely on the public and the public resources and work together in that regard.
What kind of changes will be taking place over the next few months? I know sometimes the ones that make the biggest difference are not always the ones that will get the attention or that are that visible. What kind of changes will we be seeing over the next few months?
Mostly internal changes. At this point, I'm still working on the re-engineering of the department, looking at the various divisions and making sure that what we do is responding to our needs, that we use our resources logically, that we're getting the most out of our resources. I'm continuing to reorganize and restructure, and that takes a while. And before we complete that, we're happy with that, then we need to look externally and see how we can enhance what we're doing outside of the department. It's somewhat of a concurrent effort. It takes some time to speak specifically on some programs and projects. I'm not at liberty at this point to really share with them because we're still in the planning stages.
Of course, I guess part of that will be getting the community more involved, it sounds like.
Absolutely, yeah.
Where do you like to see the department within 1 year?
Pretty well on its way to being the best police department in the state of Georgia. Pretty well on its way. Probably at that time it should be. I have a tremendous staff. I have a tremendous command staff. We have identified and isolated goals and objectives that need to be pursued. We've developed a new mission statement some couple of weeks ago, which is based on pride, taking pride in the city, pride in what we do, as we look to the future, to the end of the century and beyond. And there's a vision there now. There's a plan. We have a roadmap. There are things that are very doable that will make our organization better and that the people of Macon can call its finest.
Of course, there has been some talk about morale in the police department over the past few years. What kind of efforts do you have on that front as well? Or does it all kind of work together, I guess, with the training and looking at the pay, that sort of thing?
It works together, and when I came on, the morale was a matter to be concerned about. That will come around. It's continuing to come around. I get feedback every day from my people. I see one of my officers on the street, I shake his or her hand and I salute him, and I tell them I believe in them. And then they see my actions, and they see the changes that are going on, and they're getting very excited. So that will pick up the morale quite a bit, where people feel good about themselves, good about the badge, and good about where they work in their profession. That's important.
From a law enforcement standpoint, what's the biggest challenge you see facing Macon right now?
Probably looking at the crime problems. We have allowed, as an organization and as a city, we've allowed certain things to reach a certain level where it should never reach that level. For instance, the gangs. If we knew 10 years ago that the gang problem was emerging, we never should have gone into denial. And you see communities around the country do the same thing with problems. They just don't want to face reality and don't think that it can come to Macon, that it belongs in New York or Chicago or Philadelphia. Well, that's a challenge. In looking at things for its reality, addressing those problems to a point where we stop it and we take care of business and we do our best. That's what's important.
Sounds like ignoring it will go away doesn't work.
No, that doesn't work. I'm not that type of a manager either.
How hard is it to get people to I guess, be willing to acknowledge? Sometimes it is hard to acknowledge that there is a problem, but then a lot of times folks say it's the first step to addressing that problem.
Well, I'm doing a lot of public speaking now, and as I mentioned a few moments ago, I'm visiting the churches and the civic organizations and various groups, and after every time I deliver a speech, which is usually on ethics and values and integrity and professionalism, I open the floor and I say, now I want to hear from you. Tell me what your concerns are. And at that point, I'm listening to the concerns, I'm responding to the questions, and I'm letting the citizens across all segments of the community know where we're at, where we're going, what reality is all about, and what I expect them and I would like for them, how I would like for them to contribute, and so it can be a team effort. I think that's important. Everybody wants to get on board, everybody wants to be concerned, and everybody wants to help. And that's exciting, that's great.
What are your final thoughts on your new position and on the Macon Police Department and the city in general?
I'm glad to be here. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to work in the city. The support has been overwhelming from all segments of the community, and I'm happy about that.
Well, we appreciate you joining us. And
certainly.
Thank you for joining us as well. We'll see you back here next week on Close Up.